Hey everyone, today on the Squarebody Scientist we'll be covering something that I don't see a whole lot of any information on YouTube or anywhere else. We're going to get into the world of grain truck motors, also known as tall deck big block Chevys. They were available in 366 cubic inch and 427 cubic inch displacements, and they're kind of frowned upon in the truck community, or they're ignored, and they're kind of seen as being useless or worthless because you can't spin them very high. They're dimensionally a quarter inch bigger on each deck, and they don't seem to be of interest to many people. So I'm going to see what one actually does in a half ton or a 3/4 ton square body truck, and we're going to kind of get into what they are and why I find them interesting, and maybe they're a great option. I don't know. So join me for this little journey and taking some tech on kind of an ignored and forgotten motor. So here they are. I've got a pair of them here. It ended up working out. I bought one a long time ago, and then the other one kind of came up. I was traveling, and it came up in an area I was traveling through, so I picked up both. The blue one here, this is from what I can tell from the codes, it's like a mid-70s tall deck 427. I was told it came out of a late 60s C50 or C60, like 3-ton grain truck of some sort, of GMC or whatever. Supposedly was rebuilt. It's dry seized. We're going to be leaving it alone for now. It's fully dressed still. It's still got the grain truck intake on it and the weird distributor and all the accessories and stuff. I'll pull this one apart complete in a different video to show the disassembly process, which I've already started on this one. This is a 366 cubic inch tall deck. This came out of a 77 C50, and the truck was a runner. They ripped it apart. They wanted to make a grain deck out of just the back. So he sold this to me. And the thing about these motors, the reason I'm even doing this is these, for at least in the world of big block Chevys here in Midwestern Canada, these are very plentiful and they're very cheap. You can pick one of these up for actually less money than a small block 350 or a 400 or anything like that. So the blue one came in a package deal. I basically paid $1,000 for it, which is too much money, to be honest with you. I overpaid on it a little bit, but I wanted to see and mess around, and it is a 427, so out of the tall deck big blocks, guys seem to like these because you can really cut them deep, and you can make, your 602 or whatever out of the tall deck. This 366 was oil bath, air cleaner to power steering pump complete, belt and everything, had a bell housing on it and all that, and I paid $400 for it. And it spun over really nicely. I spun it over at his farm, like with a bar, and there was no water and oil or anything. So for $400, I thought, well, I can't even buy a running small block Chevy for under $800 anymore. Why not try it out? So I've got it here. I've already started the disassembly process on it. I'm getting used to this whole YouTube thing and recording everything, so we're a little bit late. But it was fully dressed. I stripped it all down. And the beauty of these tall decks is most of the parts are interchangeable with your low deck 454, 396, that sort of thing. So as we take a closer look here, I just basically popped the intake manifold off and said, hey, I should record this. So here we are, my $400 366, and the intake came off. It was a little bit dirty, like it was covered in mouse turds and whatnot, but I cracked it open here, and actually it's looking pretty decent in here. There's no signs of water. There's oil on everything, so the oiling system seemed to be working. I don't see anything crazy wear-wise. All the push rods are nice and tight, and like I said, it's spun really nice. So far it's looking so good. Again, I wish I would have started recording earlier. When I pulled the distributor out of this motor, I took a look down in the oil pump hole, and it's kind of tough to see in the video, but these actually accept a different oil pump drive gear on the distributor compared to your regular big block or small block Chevy. So this one I'm actually going to end up putting an oil pump into, which I didn't intend, but now that we're here, I'm not going to be running the distributor in it. And I will show you the distributor. So here's the distributor I pulled out of the 366. It's point style, and it's pretty much the same as your typical small block big block Chevy distributor shaft, but it's got these little things on the bottom where the gear drive is, and of course the engagement for the oil pump's a lot different. So they have the oil pressure sensor on there, and they're limited by vacuum. These things rev out at 3,500 RPM. You can't rev past them with these old school stock distributors. So we're going to have to remedy that when we run intake spacers on this motor, which I picked up and I'll show you. Basically, a lock collar that's adjustable you can buy on aftermarket distributors. I'm going to try a couple different things with this. Once I put the newer oil pump into the motor, I might, I've got a whole pile of these sitting around. I might grind one of them down and just see if I can make a stock distributor work with the hold down just by grinding this down so it slips into the hole on the intake manifold. I'm just messing around. I've got lots of parts and time, and I just want to see if that'll work. Back over here at the tall deck, I wanted to take a moment. Again, I wish I would have recorded this, but they have just a standard small block, big block Chevy bell housing on them, and crank flange, whatever. You can run a big block, like a 454 flex plate. They're neutral balance. They have a big, ugly industrial bell housing with crazy adapters and starters that go in, bolt into the bell housing or whatever. I don't know if it's unknown or just not because it's not typical, but you can remove all that. And these are just like a big block Chevy, a 454. You can run 454 flex plate, bolt up any tranny, a turbo 400, turbo 350, a standard bell housing, whatever you want to do. It all bolts onto here, but I think people get scared when they see that big industrial. It comes up to about here on the motor, the big industrial, like Eaton or Fuller 13 speed that you could get behind these. But you can unbolt all that. It all comes off, and you just got your regular bell housing pattern. So right now, I'm going to get this 366 on a stand, and we're going to take a closer look at it, pull some more parts off it, and just inspect it. Now that I know I got to do an oil pump in it, I'm going to roll it over, take the pan off, and we're going to take a look at the rotating assembly in this thing. All right, now that we got this thing up on the inspection stand, I'm going to take a closer look at a couple things on this motor. First thing I'll note is I'm a one-man show. I do most of my stuff alone. I might have some guests in the future, but for the most part, all these disasters are mine to deal with. So just for your own safety purposes, bear in mind this is a big block Chevy. They weigh a lot, and it has all that extra meat on each deck, which makes quite a bit of difference. And another reason that these aren't really super preferred, I think, in the community is because they weigh a lot. It's a heavy motor, and it doesn't definitely takes away from the benefits you have of running a big block. But the part I'm curious about is this isn't going into a Chevelle or a Nova or something. This is going into a square body truck, and it's not going to be fast, but torque's going to be nice. And I actually have a truck ready for this motor. It's going to be coming in a different video here, but we're going to take a look at this thing. So when you're lifting them, watch your bolts. I bent these pretty good and screwed up the washers by lifting this motor, but it's okay. It survived. I survived. It's a good day in the shop. I'm going to pull this big quad V pulley off the bottom here, and then I'm going to flip her, and we're going to take a look at what's in the rotating assembly of this thing. So I'm learning about this too. And I'm not pulling the balancer off this motor. This 4 V-belt pulley is actually keyed onto the main flange of the crankshaft. I'll be leaving it on when we get to putting it into a square body truck. I'm going to see if this actually interferes with anything. If it doesn't, I'll just run a 4-belt pulley on it, call it a day, and not be too concerned about it. So we're going to pull this fuel pump off real quick, and then I'm going to flip her over and pop the oil pan off. All right, so I've got the 366 flipped over here. It had a big grain truck oil filter on it, so I just tossed on this Fram unit just so it doesn't drip oil and crap, and it kind of gives us a little bit more space. I don't get some junk in there. I'm just gonna grab my impact gun. We're gonna buzz off all these pan bolts and take a look. Okay, I've got all the oil pan bolts off. We're gonna tap this pan off of here and see what we got waiting for us underneath. Unfortunately, the dipstick's broken on this motor, so we're going to have to do something about that at a later point. But for now, if I can find a tool to get it off with. But for now, we're just going to remove it, take a look at, well, what's under here. I drained the oil out of this motor, and it came out black, but no coolant, no gas. Actually, the oil looked okay. Needed an oil change for sure, but there's nothing, no metal chunks in it or anything. If I really cared, I could cut open the filter and take a look. It's a $400 motor. I don't really care enough to do that. So we're just going to pop this pan off. The old rubber mallet. And let's see what's waiting for us. Ta-da! Okay, so right away, 4-bolt mains, of course. All the tall decks got 4-bolt main blocks, super strong, and an advantage definitely to running these. By the looks of everything so far, we've got non-factory numbering on the rods, which tells me someone's been in here before, which is good to see. Happy to see that someone was messing around. And you can see the marks on the crank. This has a forged steel crankshaft in it. I believe all the tall decks had them, but don't quote me. The later ones might have been cast. This one I can tell by the groove in the crank across the whole thing, the casting mark. That's not really, it's not a casting mark, it's forged. So we got a forged steel crank in this thing and 4-bolt mains. Again, I don't know why these motors get the flack they do. You got a forged crank. Right here I've got a rotating, looking good. It's nice and clean in here. There's no scarring on anything that I can see right away. The pistons look good. The skirts all seem to be okay. I paid $400 and I've got a forged steel crank and 4-bolt mains in a big block Chevy. I don't know why people don't like these. Maybe we'll find out. Again, I keep saying it, but so far she's looking good in here. I'm going to pull this oil pump off, and I'm also going to spin it a little bit, just inspect kind of the rods and the weight, like the throws of the crank and whatnot. So now that we've taken the oil pan off and we've taken a look at the motor, it's definitely worth putting some parts into to get this thing running. So bearing in mind I'm only $400 into it, we're going to spend a little bit of money here on Rock Auto. I usually buy all my parts here just because it's easy. They got lots of selection. I can buy what I need. We're going to buy a water pump for this thing because the grain truck water pump's this big weird design and it's just ugly and it's not going to be any of use to us. So I've got just a standard 454 water pump here we'll be putting on there. It's Gates, it's the cheapest one they had, so I'll put that in there. We got some oil pan gaskets, wholesale or clear out, $10, can't go wrong. Gonna toss those bad boys on there. We've got an oil pump here. This is your standard style, and I made sure to look and see there. It's got your standard oil pump drive on it, so we're gonna put that on there. I think it's high volume. Yeah, it's a high volume pump. I don't really care about that. A stock pump would have been fine. I'm just getting it to replace that rod, and we're gonna go with that. And of course, because I know I'll need them anyways, just got a set of cheap plugs on here, just copper cores, nothing crazy. I'd put something more expensive in it if it was worth it, but I'm just going to keep this motor on kind of a tight budget and make it more reasonable. The truck it's going into is not a bad unit, but I don't know anything about it either. Again, I'm going to introduce you guys to that in a later video. Some things that aren't on this list are intake gaskets, because I've got 2 sets here, which is what I'll need for the intake spacers, which I've also got here. I'll run through those when we get to putting an intake on this motor. And the distributor, again, I want to see if I can make a factory low deck distributor work with the tall deck by doing some modifications to it. I don't know if it's going to work, but we're going to see what we can do. And the other thing I don't have on here is a flex plate or a flywheel. The truck that all this stuff is going into is a standard, and apparently it has a resurfaced flywheel, and I've got a clutch sitting on my shelf. So we're going to use some used parts I've got just laying around in regards to that. And if I end up needing to buy more stuff, I will definitely tell you guys and show you guys. All these parts are purchased on Rock Auto. I'm purchasing them for a 1977 Chevy C20 with a 454 in it. Should be just perfect for our old school 2-piece main. 366 tall deck. And I'm going to take a look at the pan as well here. So far, pan's looking good inside. There's actually no carbon buildup. That's just old oil. There's no steel chunks. There's nothing ugly in here. This looks really good. I'll probably just end up regasketing this and tossing it right back on. Of course, this is a truck pan, and this is going into a truck. So this high capacity big truck pan is going to stay on this thing. And I'll give it a shot of paint as well once it's all back together. But for now, it's going to stay like this, and we're going to put a new oil pump on this thing. Stay tuned for the next video of Project 366, where I install all my new parts, give the motor a coat of paint, and get it ready to dump into its new home in a Squarebody truck. We'll see you next episode.